Okay, so we're live now.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so basically, this video was brought about by a comment that Messenger left on one of my videos, and I'm going to read it out loud so that we can kind of step through some of these points, because it aligns very, very well with other thoughts that I've had myself that dovetail into what Messenger was saying. So the comment goes, I've been meaning to do a video about the collective unconsciousness and how we're seeing it in Mgtow. Carl Jung observed identical behaviors in tribes and different civilizations who have never met or observed each other. Simple things like holding their hands together to pray. It's a tough one, as it goes into matters of the psyche and the ego, so it will take a lot of research to word it all correctly. I did see that many men are carrying guilt on their conscience as a result of shame and feelings of failure. You know, it's a bit like a never-ending cycle of man's morality residing in his conscience, repeating punishment from repeatedly punishing him for not living up to society's expectations of him. I also really like the idea of existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre. For me, was a great individualist. Okay, so maybe you want to elaborate a little bit, Messenger, on what you were talking about here.
In terms of that collective unconscious, I really see that the expectations of man, he's not really aware of most of his patterns of behavior. They're sort of predetermined, or they're laid out for him. So he just goes along with it, the expectations. But as a consequence of that, he ends up with all the side effects. So the guilt and remorse, the shame and the feelings of failure. I mean, they're all perfectly correct human emotions. And they're there to make us feel sort of bad and redress any wrongdoings. But it's because he's not conscious all of the time of the reason why he does certain things. So if we look at the way, if people don't look inward, they will always be influenced by external things, and they'll be molded by society. But the collective unconscious, as I see it, and as I understand it as best I can from Carl Jung, is it's a pattern that's predetermined, and it can go back centuries. So it's affected by things like religion, philosophy, psychology, tradition, and all of these things are sort of predisposed to be part of our character makeup. So we don't really get a say in it. It's almost genetic. So Jung would say, in much the same way as a bird or an insect is predisposed to be that animal, and those character traits are already genetically inherent. The same with human beings. And then you could say the same for man. So man doesn't really get a choice in many of his behaviors, but as a consequence of these genetic predispositions, we end up with these afflictions as a result. And it's still an idea that's forming, and I'm still struggling to word it correctly, but and in a way that people will understand. But it's becoming clear. It's starting to become clear. It might sound a bit cryptic, but it is.
Oh, no. So one thing that I picked up almost immediately on is as soon as you started bringing up the notions of guilt and shame, it immediately went back to essay 2 of On the Genealogy of Morals from Nietzsche. Now, what you're describing here, from how I see it, is the notion of the bad conscience. And Nietzsche described the bad conscience as follows. So he's saying that, like you're saying, is that man has certain predispositions that are inherent, biological. These are urges, drives, appetites. These are things that cannot be extracted from man. Now, one man is allowed to express these urges, like they were back in ye olde day, in times pre-civilization, where you can enact your urge for cruelty, your urges. You know, if you feel like murdering, you can do that, right? If you feel like doing other things, you can do that as well, sexually wise as well. There weren't these constraints. What Nietzsche was saying was that as soon as we moved over from this sort of hunter-gatherer setup, where many of these things were expressible, and moved into this more civilization building setup where rules became more important, then these urges became contradictory to how people were expected to live. But they were never removed, right? Because they cannot be removed. But their expression still needed to manifest itself. So what Nietzsche was saying is that these urges turned in on the person experiencing them. And now that desire for cruelty it became something that would be expressed against oneself. So you would punish yourself for feeling that you have this urge, like you see somebody doing something stupid and you just want to hit them. And you feel to yourself, well, I'm a bad person for having that feeling. So the desire doesn't go away. And the only way you can manifest it is not through physically hitting somebody, is by condemning yourself for having that urge to begin with. So you're still,
yeah, you can emotionally sort of torture yourself, or if it played out and manifested itself in a physical manner, then it would be in terms of self-harm or
exactly.
self-medicating with drink and drugs as a manifestation of the hatred of yourself for feeling that way.
But the hatred is a result of actually exerting that cruelty, where before you would exert it, say, on the object that you wish to exert it on, that first impulse, but now you can't. So you do it to yourself. And the cruelty needs to be exerted, but the target now changes in civilized life. And that creates this bad conscience, as Nietzsche would say.
Yeah, and it's part of the inherent character makeup of that individual, the negative character trait of that individual, as opposed to, say, a person being predisposed, um, inherently interested in mechanical things or being musically gifted. So I understand the negative side of it, where if someone's drawn towards being cruel or being a bad person, then it's going to play out in different ways.
But perhaps, I want to make a distinction that I think is going to be a theme that's going to run through our conversation. Is, again, this is back to Nietzsche, and I'm only going to focus really from my side on Nietzsche, from the psychological stuff. In his works entitled The Birth of Tragedy, he talks about tragedy in terms of the tragic poets like Sophocles. And he's trying to identify what made tragedy tragic in terms of more of that of human quality. So he distinguished between the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Now, these were two gods in Greek mythology, and Apollo was typically branded as the god of order, and Dionysus was more of the orgiastic sort of unfettered emotional thing. So you have like Dionysian cults that would engage in these orgies, engage in drug use, and be completely unrestrained. And I think a modern day example of a Dionysian cult would be, a Dionysian experience would be something like the Burning Man festival, where there's no real structure there. It's this kind of free for all thing of experimenting with sensual experiences. And what we're getting here is that some of these emotions that we do have are Dionysian by nature, that they're not guided necessarily in this structured Apollonian sort of logical way. So when we went from this hunter-gatherer aspect to a civilized aspect, we started applying these Apollonian constraints, these orders upon things that are naturally Dionysian. Like if even you look at something like sex, right? If you look at sex, it inherently is a Dionysian sort of experience. It's not meant really to be ordered too much, because when you start applying too much order and arrangement onto it, then you get these affirmative consent laws, which completely destroys any value in the experience itself.
See, a lot of these behaviors, if we talk about the unconscious, if we talk about these predetermined behaviors that were genetically bred into people even before they were born, it was determined that that would be part of your character makeup. It could be said that those unconscious character traits that many people aren't aware of sort of work their way up. So they will play out and they will manifest themselves in that person's behavior but he doesn't know why he's doing it. So it goes from the unconscious level, moves up to the subconscious, and then becomes evident in the conscious as a pattern of behavior. So it's almost like the thoughts become the words, become the actions thing. And in that respect, you could almost predict a person's behavior in the future. So if you know a lot about their upbringing or their family's traditions, many of the things that could have influenced their character traits, you could say they could be possibly they could be that type of person in the future. So they could be the person that attends the orgies or takes drugs. You know, it's almost mapped out for them. It's like a pattern that's already set.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, that it is an influence in many ways by culture and religion or whatever it is that may be imbuing manifestations of these inner drives. And I think that's the distinction that needs to exist, is that there's a force acting upon the person that then manifests itself in something that can actually be enacted within society as it is, right? So even the notion of cruelty can be enacted, but it has to be culturally appropriate. Otherwise, you go to jail, right? So something like trolling on the internet or making fun of people and being insulting is this manifestation of cruelty. But its manifestation itself is being done, in I guess a reasonably socially acceptable way. Now, I think if we look at the human animal as a whole, you should be able to identify these certain quirks about them. But how they're going to manifest, I suppose, is dependent on how strong any individual appetite is within the individual. And that itself is a challenge.
Do you think they know why they do the things they do? You know, in
They
terms of
they will.
if they only look to external influences and their beliefs of they don't realize that their beliefs and their behaviors were sort of influenced maybe before they were born, and it resides in the unconscious, then they may never be able to understand why they do these things, where these behaviors are coming from. It could go back centuries, it could go back into traditions that they're not even aware of.
Well, I think part of it is the simple idea that there's something that's acceptable and that you're supposed to be, I suppose. And if you start to go down a trail of thinking that deviates from projecting yourself as this acceptable being, you'll find a rationalization that will potentially account for your behavior in a way that's not actually true, right? So, for example, cruelty is not a thing that we necessarily applaud in current culture, but it may very well be your desire to enact cruelty that fuels your behavior. But because it's not the way you want to see yourself, you'll rationalize it as something else, that you were unjustly treated or as something like that.
There's an interesting point, the way you want to see yourself. How many people consider the way they want to see themselves, and how many people only consider the way they're perceived to be by everybody else? So if you look at the way a man behaves, he could, in different social settings, behave differently. Say he would behave differently at work to the way he behaved at home with his family, and his behaviors could be so different. He could almost be said to have two personalities there. So he's trying to appease other people with his behavior. So he's not really behaving in a manner that befits him. He's just trying to gain the approval of others by behaving the way that they want him to behave. So he fits in. It's that external thing. I must appease the external. And if he just took the time to look inward, he would then have to deal with his conscience and his sense of morality, which is why people not looking inward often do feel this overwhelming sense of guilt and remorse, because they know they're doing wrong, but they just can't help it. They've got to appease everybody else in their immediate surroundings.
Well, when we get to the question of identity, I mean, what you're describing is the mirroring, right? You
Mm,
mirror the people around you, basically meeting their expectations. That somehow is what you feel you're supposed to be doing, I suppose. I mean, many people do behave this way. I mean, the dress codes
yeah.
at work, blah blah blah. Um, but in order to actually find yourself, right, you have to remove all these other things that you're mirroring around you. And this is something that doesn't happen in modern society. And I mean, solitude. You need to be alone for a long period of time before all those other things that you can be mirroring back, they disappear and you forget about them and you're only left with yourself.
Exactly.
Because that's, I think, with a lot of people, they don't even notice themselves. They're always busy mirroring in this way. They get into these habits of being, like you're describing, this way at work, this way in family, this way, at some function or whatever. But it's really only through solitude that you find yourself. But when you look at somebody's life, look at how it's run on rails. Look at how you're born and then you're pretty much domesticated by your parents up till the age of 6. Then on rails, you head to elementary school. Everything's dictated for you, how when you're supposed to wake up, when you're supposed to go here,
Hmm.
what you're supposed to study, what you're supposed to read, how you're expected to behave, what you're expected to be tested on. And so you should know. You go from elementary school to high school, which is the same process, except now you're adding a second layer um, where there's more social acceptance being dictated by your peers as opposed to just purely your teachers. And then after that, the lucky ones, quote unquote, go to university, which just adds another, 3 to 7 years of living on rails. And in all this period, that person never actually is alone. You live with your parents most likely till the end of high school. When you go to university, it's either you living in a student housing on campus with a roommate or with 4 or 5 other people. By that point, you probably have a girlfriend that you've had for a while, and you end up moving in with her soon after that. There's never a time and place where a man, at least from what I've noticed from many men, where they lived on their own, completely independent, financially independent, in their own apartment, away from other people, so that there's no one to go to, no one to talk to. You're just there alone.
And there's the collective unconscious. All of their behaviors are influenced by their immediate surroundings, the way the rest of society behaves, and they feel the need to conform, and they never have to deal with or try to develop a sense of individuality. So they're always mirroring, like you say, they wear the mask to fit in, and pretty soon everybody wears the same mask, and all their behaviors are dictated by everybody else around them. So, like in religion, again, the clasping of hands to pray, everybody does it. And like you say, you've got to go through this predetermined pattern of life and the social pressure to get an education. Right, you've done that. Now you need to settle down. Now you need to get a girlfriend. Now you need to move in together. Now you need to have children. And there's the collective unconscious at work. And that person, like you say, never gets the time to be alone. And we have to distinguish between being lonely and being alone. Um, Being lonely is forced upon a person. It's not something they choose to experience. It's an uneasy feeling, and often it's because they've been rejected by society. They're a lonely individual. But being alone by choice and having that time to contemplate and look inward and reflect and find out who you are and get to know yourself without all these external pressures, then these people can develop themselves as an individual. That's what I'm seeing in Mgtow. I'm seeing um, some of the collective unconscious beginning to manifest itself as it grows. There are patterns of collective behavior that are starting to form, which takes away from the individuation and the self-actualization, the introspection. It's almost become like, I'm not going to use the word cult because it's not. I think that's a detrimental word to use. But it's almost become like a group, and there are sort of acceptable ways of behaving and not. And if you don't fit in, you could possibly be outcast, which is ridiculous because you live the life. Mgtow is you, and everybody has their own interpretation of what it is within certain boundaries. But it is moving very insidiously towards this collective unconscious where people are being influenced by others around them. That's just something I'm starting to see.
Yeah, no, for sure, I do agree with you, but I want to use a different word, right? I want to use the word of identity. Now, look at this. You're saying that there's a certain set of behavior. Now, let's look at the example of the military, right? The
Mm-hmm.
military takes a civilian, it puts them through this boot camp process where it strips that civilian identity from the individual and
Yeah.
injects the soldier's identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the soldier is not himself stripped of individuality in the sense of personality. So their personality remains intact, but now there's somebody who is who not only physically grows stronger because they need to, well, be strong to be a soldier. They not only just learn to shoot a gun, but psychologically they also get changed so that they're willing to aim a gun at some another human being with intent of pulling the trigger, right? That
Yeah.
I think is something that needs to be ingrained in a soldier. That isn't something a civilian necessarily possesses. Now, what you end up happening, especially in the military, is that this identity is so emotionally fueled into you through the harsh treatments, the trials you go through, the sleep deprivation in boot camp, the 20-kilometer marches at 5 in the morning, the lack of food, and all these other things. So you gain this huge emotional kind of vestment from these experiences into this identity. And then what you end up seeing is that you see veterans who will always identify as soldiers. I mean, when you look at the American Marine Corps, Semper Fidelis, which Latin means something like always loyal, like it's for life. You keep that identity for life. Even if you get discharged after 10 years and become a baker for 30, you still identify as a soldier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I see in the military, and I see it with a lot of male careers, or um, what would be the word? You can't call it a career. It's the way men are treated. Men are given numbers, and I see that as a way of them, the establishment, dehumanizing that man, and making him aware of the fact that he is disposable. So in the military, they'll get given a number, and I think I may be wrong, but I think it's a way of the establishment saying you are no longer a person, you're a number. And they do it to prisoners as well. You get given a number, and it's almost like now we're going to do what we want with you. You've been stripped of your name, your identity. You are now number 15, and you're all numbers. You're assigned different numbers. Maybe it helps them categorize these men and organize everything better. But I always saw that as a sort of dehumanization of the man.
For these institutions, for prisoners and for soldiers, I think to some extent it's necessary for the goals of the institution, right? So they create this identity and they inject these well, for say the military, male disposability, because well, that creates order. Desertion is punished by death because you're basically acting a little bit too much out of fashion. Um, and it's that whole thing about identity, but identities can be formed in very, very different ways. So, or to very different models. Now, when we're talking about Mgtow, what you're saying, this group unconscious, I think that Mgtow is slowly building up its own identity. That to identify as Mgtow has a certain range of things that are being ingrained into people to create this uniform, well, identity, basically. It's still very immature. It doesn't have too many restrictions around it, and it does preach the aspect of individuality to the extent that you can be Mgtow and then you can be a baker, you can be this and that, blah blah blah. But there's a core set of things I think that do distinguish somebody who's Mgtow from somebody who's not. And the sort of way I've been looking at it is almost like a transition from being a gynocentric man to a post-gynocentric man, being
Yeah.
sort of more in that core, what distinguishes Mgtow from non-Mgtow.
So if we look at the new identity as a MGTOW, because it is, like you say, it's almost like a deconstruction of the man, almost like in the military where they break him down and build him up again, but we're having to do it ourselves. So it's a deconstruction of the man, then the reprogramming of the way he conducts himself and the way he views society. So it's almost like before we became MGTOW, we were victims of this collective unconscious, and we weren't really aware of why we behaved in certain ways. We just went along with it because we were told that's how a man has to be. And obviously there were consequences in terms of being made. You could be emasculated. A man will always be, oh, you're not a man. You could be stripped of your manhood if you don't provide for a woman. You're seen as less of a man. So we were always victims of this collective unconscious before MGTOW. And now we've become aware of all of those unconscious influences on us and the way we behaved. And now we are aware of the detrimental effects on us and our lives. Now we've sort of become less a part of that collective unconscious, and we are moving towards the individuality. But I can see the identity. There has to be a core identity, but that I think there are also within that there are subdivisions.
Oh, for
So
sure.
people
Yeah.
can respect someone and say, okay, he's MGTOW, but he's chosen to be a monk, or he's chosen to date women but never get married or never cohabit. But you can't say he's not MGTOW because he's doing that. And there will always be differences of opinions between those two camps, but you could never say he's not MGTOW, he is. So within MGTOW, yeah, there is this core identity, but there are these certain subsections. It's very difficult to put a finger on it, because again, because we're all individuals, none of us can say, you're not MGTOW, you have to conform to this standard, because then we become conformists, and then we become this collective unit, and then it becomes a cult. Then we can say that's a cult. We're all following this ideology, and it's almost brainwashing. Where people aren't allowed to be individuals anymore. They just become, molded into this MGTOW ideal.
Now, what I see is that, like the gynocentric man, and I want to touch on many of the points because I do have a bit of a model that I've been brainstorming here as to describe and unify many, many of the phenomenon that we've experienced in the community. Now, the gynocentric man, I think the identity that exists as part of that is a kind of a slave identity, in the sense that it doesn't dictate its own rules, because it always has the female as the thing against which it defines itself. So a man is somebody who treats a woman well, who provides, right? There's always this other third party that you're bouncing it off against, right? Where I think shifting away from that gynocentric identity to a post-gynocentric identity is to remove the third party. There's no more, yeah.
He measures his manhood against the next man.
Yeah. Or another standard that is definitely not female in nature. Or yes, against another man, and I do agree with that. And I think that's kind of the shift that's happening here. And I do agree that there's concepts that there's arguments. There's a lot of arguments in MGTOW, and I think part of the reason is because we conflate so many things to the word MGTOW, right? It's just this universal word that covers so many different facets that themselves can be broken out in language. So let me give you one example. The MGTOW quote unquote community. Now let's describe this in terms of actual things. So there's YouTube, there's websites, there's content producers, there are listeners. And all these people are interacting in various ways, right? Now you can say that's MGTOW. Well, it isn't, right? It's an infrastructure. There's a MGTOW infrastructure that has been created, and that's its own thing. Then you have people trying to instill these definitions of what is a Mgtow individual as a man, what kind of rules do you follow, or something like that. That has nothing to do with the infrastructure anymore, but the infrastructure seems to be grouped into this term of Mgtow. So now we can say, definitions of Mgtow. People have said it's like I Am Serious has said, well, it's the last remaining male-only space. Or you can say it's a philosophy or a movement or whatever, right? And you start conflating these things like it is this, it is this, it is this. If we take, say, Aristotle's view on looking at what a thing is, we must find out what its function is. So what would you say the function of Mgtow is?
Oh, self-preservation for the man, for the individual man. That's as I've always said it from day one, Mgtow is about self-preservation, and that's its primary function for any man that adopts the philosophy.
Right, but again, I don't think that I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think there's another sense in which we can understand the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who comes in as a blue pillar, right, undergoes a transformation, don't they?
Yeah.
Right. So would it not be the case that the function of Mgtow and the infrastructure underlining it is to facilitate that transformation?
Yeah, it would be in effect the breaking down and rebuilding of that man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the product of this transformation is what you're describing. Somebody who is concerned with their self-preservation and has an identity that's post-gynocentric.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. If you look to Mgtow as an external influence on the man, but without his introspection and the work he's got to do on himself, Mgtow, just as we can see with a lot of people, they take on the information, but they don't actually change as a person. So the effect of Mgtow is debatable. Unless the man willingly does the work, then it's not going to change him who he is. He's never going to reprogram. He's got to reprogram himself.
That's
Does
right.
that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense, actually. And here's where I think I introduced my little theory on how to unify all these Mgtow things. Are you familiar with the rites of passages of man in various cultures?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an ethnographer called Arnold van Gennep. He's a Dutch, German, French mix ethnographer. And now he studied rites of passages across multiple cultures. And he tried to kind of come up with a bit of a unified theory on what all these things seem to do, right? Now, the first stage, and there are three stages, three phases of any rite of passage, and this is a male-only thing. Women don't do this. The first stage is called the end. Now, it's the end because he's talking about really a boy turning into a man, right? Going from boyhood to manhood. It's the end because it's the marking point, the period in time where you leave and exit this notion that you're going to remain a boy with boy expectations imposed upon you and boy obligations, whatever those may be. And that's a very simple to understand thing. Then you have this middle phase called the threshold, which is the actual transition itself, and what that may entail we can talk about later. And then you have the last phase, the third phase, being the beginning. And the beginning is the reintroduction of the individual back into society under his new identity as a man.
Yeah.
Right? So let me read you a few things about some of this stuff. I have this printed out, so I'll just read it verbatim from his book called The Rite of Passage. And this book was published in 1909. So it says, a rite of passage always includes one or more ordeals or trials. The boy's experience of the trial is the formal confirmation of his readiness to take on the role of manhood. Though threshold trials models are many and diverse, certain taboos or means of being tried are common to most. One is the trial of aloneness or solitude. The boy is denied the support and comfort of others and is left alone in a wild space for extended periods of time. With no one to go to, he is forced to deal with outward circumstances by discovering inner resources of strength and resolve. Without other humans' eyes to judge him, the candidate watches himself be. Apart from the accoutrements of his boyhood life, he learns what is essential to him and what is not. The closed doors of his heart opens to the beauty and mystery of the natural world around him. Another restriction almost universally practiced is the prohibition of food. Among ceremonial tools, fasting is one of the oldest and finest. The candidate's psyche is open to orchestration by the elements and rhymes of the natural world. Now, the next comment that he's making here is the role of male midwives. Now, one of the most important components in any model of an adequate rite of male passage is the presence of older men, or elders, who supervise and enrich the progress of the young men through the ceremonial birth canal. The older men help the younger men to bring themselves forth. They are not there to answer questions, but to ask them. They work to enable their charges to give birth to answers of their own, to know themselves. The midwives are exclusively male, because the time has come for the boy to become men, to live in, to respect, and to accept the men's world. A father must not be the principal midwife of his son, as the past often shadows them with too many habits for the father to be an effective teacher or the son an attentive learner. Now, the third thing is, well, actually, there's two more. The third thing is the role of discipline and work. The classic archetypical male is unaccustomed to self-indulgence. He has learned to accept hardship as his lot. He does not brag of his harsh life, nor does he secretly hope his woman will pity him. This is the man's way. Any passage rite for men must include components of hard work and self-discipline. The candidates must be expected to be part of the group, to pull their own weight. Hence, the young men facing adulthood must be gathered together within a communal order where each has his work and does it as part of the preparation for the passage. They must be expected to accept the discipline that communal living brings and to seek the joy that comes with the exercising of self-control and the intimate knowledge of the meaning of work. And the last bit, which is the most interesting, at least for Mgtow, on sexual instruction. Sexual instruction and advice on marriage is traditionally a part of ceremonies of passage into manhood. The importance of a young man coming to understand and accept the power of his own sexuality cannot be understated. Any ceremony of passage into adulthood must take into account the young man's sexual growth and relationship with women. Open, honest, adult sexual education would seem necessary and appropriate. And what's interesting is that what he observed, what Ginep observed, is that this entire ceremony, this entire rite of passage takes place in isolation from the mainstream and is only populated by those making the transition and by the elders facilitating the transition. Now, if we apply this to Mgtow, I think a lot of the same themes run through it.
It does. Right. I've made a few notes on that passage. Firstly, the rite of passage from boy into man. That's so interesting because many people, many men now are comparing their manhood as man compared to woman. And there's this constant comparison, obviously, because women are competing with men, but there's this constant comparison between men and women. And I don't see that as the embodiment of a man. The embodiment of a man when he becomes a man is the difference between a man and a boy, not the difference between a man and a woman. So that the rite of passage I always understood was, you know, he's no longer a boy, he's a man. And I see these constant comparisons between men and women, and it makes me feel uneasy because I think, no, that's not how you determine what a man is. You know, if a man remains childlike all his life, you can't really say he's manlike or he's manly. So that's the first thing I picked up on. And there's a degree of stoicism there, you know, where it's, you know, the man has to put up with his lot and be hardy and work hard and never complain. And I do agree with that. People don't like it because it's that man up message, but I think that's one of the main weapons men have got. You know, it's a bonus. It's something we can use to get on in life. And if we embrace it, and if we work hard, and we use that, we can draw the benefits. In the past, women and society always reap the rewards of a man's stoicism and his willingness to work and bear hardship and never complain. But now, if we can do that for themselves, for ourselves, we've got no reason to moan about manning up. You know, we don't have to. We don't have to work that hard. We don't have to put ourselves through it. But if we do, any rewards gained from it come directly to us. And I see a couple of times, I'm not really sure how to word it, but I've always seen Mgtow as sort of being reborn. It's almost like the old person has died. The old you has to die. Otherwise, you can't be born again. And if you try and cling on to it, there's going to be remnants of that old personality, and it's going to taint the new man. So it's always going to hold you back. So I always saw this sort of Mgtow philosophy as a dying of the old man and a rebirth of a new individual. And
Yeah.
then you speak about the elders. It's interesting because Warhorse was mentioning the greybeards, and I loved the phrase the greybeards, because you know when these men speak simply by the color of their beard, you know that that man can give you advice, and you'd be a fool not to take his advice because he's been there, he's seen it, he's done it, and he's not preaching, he's just telling you these things because he's obviously made mistakes or seen others made mistakes, and he just doesn't want the younger man to fall into the same traps that he may have done. And then the last point I see, something I've never spoken about, but I've been thinking about, is older men being more aware of their mortality. And I think a lot of the risk taking in younger men is because they perceive themselves not to be invincible, but they don't really have a concept of the fact that they've got a certain amount of time on this earth. And it sort of dawns on you at a certain age in your life, you think, shit, I've achieved nothing up until now, or everything I've achieved up until now has been taken down or taken from me. And now the clock is ticking. Now time's running out. Now I'm really aware of the fact that I'm only around for a certain amount of time. And I need to get rid of all these old character traits. You know, this old man that didn't serve me, this past self that obviously didn't serve me well. And in the rest of my life, the second half, if you like, I need to be aware of the time that's left and how much I can achieve. And then you start to plan. Then you say, well, what can I accomplish between now and then? And is it possible? Is it plausible? Are my plans achievable? And in the younger men, I just see them throwing caution to the wind and being reckless. And I was the same when I was younger. But it's almost like the older men are saying to the younger ones, you can't be like that forever. At some point in your life, you've got to say, take stock of what's left, you know, and invest your time wisely, not just in money, but invest your time wisely as well. Because every day that goes by could be a wasted day, is potentially a wasted day. So yeah, I see all these elements in those rites of passage, but I think Mgtow is probably the only rite of passage that there is uh, for men in civilized society these days.
I completely agree. And that's what I'm trying to get at here with this whole argument. Looking at the infrastructure now, there's people defining what Mgtow is, but I started looking at what does the community do? I mean, we have all these various arguments and things like that, and the divisions and all that. But at the end of the day, there's a certain kind of formula and transition that happens. It's the notion of starting as a blue pill man, ending as a red pill man. You know, this going from being gynocentric to being post-gynocentric or non-gynocentric. And there's a certain transition, a certain sort of morals and lessons that need to flow in between. And the whole infrastructure, the YouTube channels, the content creators, the forums, the websites, it's all just like this summer camp that lives in isolation. Now, when we look at MGTOW, it's all male. We exclude women. And the
Yeah.
only people involved are the people talking the message and the people listening to the message. It exactly runs that formula. And from what I see, I mean, it's an identity. It's crafting a certain type of identity. But not everything in MGTOW right now conforms completely to this formula. For example, in these rites of passages, and this is going to reflect very well about people, coming in, staying for a few months, dropping out, and all that. There are no trials, right? When we talked about the military, part of I feel that part of the reason why people retain that soldier identity for pretty much the end of their life is because there's these harsh trials that you feel kind of involved and special in, like hazing in terms of joining a fraternity, right? There's these trials you have to go through that unify you. We don't have that in MGTOW. So you get a lot of people who I don't think are overly committed to the identity. And I don't particularly think that we need necessarily to impose any mandate on trials, but I think a trial, and I have two in mind, that if implemented by individuals, that they choose to put themselves through this. Who calls themselves MGTOW? I couldn't care less, because at the end of the day, it's really living the life that gives you the benefit, not calling yourself something or watching a few videos.
Yeah.
So one of the trials I was imagining is that how many people, those who hoist upon themselves the MGTOW label, free themselves of, like you would say, pussy addiction, right? How many of them would say be willing, on their own volition, to commit to 2 years of no sex? Now, I would imagine that many would basically come up in arms saying, well, that's not required of MGTOW. It's not part of the definition, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it doesn't really matter. The point is, could you do it? Could you actually do it? Or would you have these appetites that are controlling you so strongly that you couldn't actually persevere through 2 years? Because when you're not consumed by something, you don't crave it, and you could actually abstain. And I can tell even from my younger years that, I mean, I spent, 13 years in relationships, a lot of sex in that time, that when I started kind of not having it in the frequencies that I was expecting it in, that there would be this sort of withdrawal. And because there was a presence of withdrawal, that clearly meant that I craved outside of my own will, that this is something I needed as opposed to something I chose. So to purge yourself of that addiction, or to purge yourself of that addiction, you would need to abstain for a long period of time. And then after that, then you could freely say that you're choosing to participate in any sort of sexual activity.
Yeah, it's that sort of abstaining from an addiction. And when you finally overcome the addiction and you're in control of it, then you can go back to partaking in that addiction in moderation, and it no longer rules you. You're in control of it. You've got a handle on it. Um, like an alcoholic, instead of him being a non-functioning alcoholic, and it destroys his life, his job, everything, his finances. He can't pay his rent. When he abstains for long enough and he can control it, then he gets his life back. Then he can have a job and look after his finances, and he can say to himself, 2 pints, that's me done. And then then he's in control of his actions.
Yeah, no, I agree exactly in that way, where you're no longer compelled by the drink itself. And to even stretch this analogy in another way, is just a blue pill man, when he comes in and he starts listening to MGTOW ideas. Let's imagine that he finds himself that he's pussy addicted, whatever. That imagine that means that he's drunk right then and there. And that acknowledgement that you're drunk may be a surprise to you, because some people, and I've encountered people that get wasted and have no idea they're drunk. They think they're completely fine. Now, Imagine the acknowledgement of just that you're drunk, and you think to yourself, okay, now I know I'm drunk. I didn't know this before. And so being aware that I'm drunk, I'm going to take certain cautionary measures that I probably shouldn't do this. I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But they don't ever sober up. They continue to be drunk and just with that awareness mitigate certain things that they realize are not probably the best things to do while drunk, right?
Hmm.
Now, I see a lot of men kind of falling into that category, whereby which they never purge of the alcohol itself. They never sober up. They just mitigate the circumstances of being drunk, and they believe that is sufficient. But if
We're talking
you were to,
about habitual cycles. So if you don't replace that habitual cycle with something else, or like you say, abstain, then it's there. It's always going to be there. And I think abstinence is one way, but replacing these addictions or these patterns of behavior by not putting yourself in certain social circumstances, not going to clubs, not going to places where the temptation is going to be there, not logging on to dating websites, all that sort of stuff, because that's almost lapsing back into old patterns of habitual behavior. And rather than do that, they need to be conscious. It sounds really silly, and I did this a long time ago, and it actually worked. I think people aren't aware, and again, we're back to this collective unconscious. People aren't aware of how often they think about things. And I used to get an elastic band and put it around my wrist, and I thought, right, now, every single day when I think of something negative, I'm going to snap this band. And it will just cause a slight shock, and I'll say, oh, come on, snap out of it, literally. Stop thinking like that. You need to be positive. And I became aware of how many times I had to snap this band every single morning. And I thought, Jesus, you're actually thinking about these things quite a lot. And I'm not sure if these people, if they became aware of how often they thought about these things, these destructive patterns of behavior. I mean, women and sex shouldn't be damaging to our lives, but in the current sort of socio-economic circumstances, it is, and it's, we all know it could just pull the rug from under a man and just destroy his future for the next 10 or 20 years. But if they're aware of every single time they think about logging on, or they think about going to a club, or they think about looking at a woman, then they can say, stop doing that. Go and read a book. Go and research that trip you always wanted to go on. Start looking at travel fees, just replace these patterns of behavior. I don't think people are aware of what's going on in the unconscious. I think they're always working at this conscious level. And there's almost like a dichotomy there. It's like a conflict where they live this conscious life, and they're not aware of these messages filtering up from the unconscious that just completely conflict with what they think they want to do. And the next thing you know, they're behaving in ways and they don't understand why. And then they come to their life 10 years down the line and say, where did it all go wrong? Well, it all went wrong because you never knew the reasons why you did things in the first place. You never took that time to abstain, or you never took that time to adopt new habitual cycles of behavior. So there's that sort of, it's almost as if people are unaware of why they do the things they do. And then they have to excuse the reasons why they do it because they know it's wrong. So then they're not accepting responsibility. They have to excuse it or pretend it was something else, or something that's out of their control. And then you see these, when people's lives go wrong and it's of their own doing, they repeat that pattern of behavior. They'll do it again and they'll do it again, and then they'll never redress the balance or accept any remorse or guilt that they should be feeling, and change those patterns of behavior. So it's very difficult, and it's different for every individual, which is why we can't. I don't think we can figure out why people do things. I think only that person will ever know if he takes the time to look inward. It's just a different journey for every man.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at like, yes, there's a great deal of repetition, a great deal of repeating the same mistakes, and I think the reason behind that is because uh, the disposition of the individual never changes. They don't enact a set of I'll just continue using this rites of passage wording, is that they don't enact a set of trials to change themselves to the position whereby which they have a new point of view under
Yeah,
which they're making these new decisions under. So I always I look at certain family members of mine and I look at what the decisions they're making, and I know what they're thinking, but I know the context they're making the decision under is from a point of weakness. So they'll find a way to justify a continuation of something despite all argument to the opposition. And I know that a certain purge would bring them to a point of strength from which, if they were making the same decisions, they would make very different decisions. So when it comes to, say, like those guys that in terms of like I don't date, I fucking have sex maybe once a year. I don't really care. I don't see women anymore. They exist. That's all well and good. That wasn't the case for a lot of my adult life. This is like something last 3 years. And I found that looking back now, when who I was, say, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was very many drives that were compelling me to perform certain actions that weren't really chosen, in the sort of way that, I'd go to bars and clubs with the intent of getting laid,
yeah,
but I would never go to those bars or clubs for any other reason. I didn't want to be there. I mean, that's just where you go, what you do. I had an alternate agenda for the whole thing. Today, it's not the same story because I underwent this long purge, and the whole idea of picking up women, it just became this thing that never really crosses my mind anymore. It's something that, like, like a food you don't really eat that often. It doesn't cross your mind, but like every so many months, you're like, hey, that would be kind of nice to have, and you kind of just randomly stumble into it. And that's kind of how sex has become, and or any sort of interaction with women. Don't exclude them necessarily, but I don't pursue any of that. But I find those guys that come to MGTOW but never break any of the habits they brought into MGTOW, um, they still are compelled in many ways by those same urges. So though they are now a bit more protective of how they engage with those urges are still compelling them to enact the same actions as somebody unaware of them would be. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter whether I'm blue pill or red pill. If I'm going to clubs to pick up women, I'm still behaving the same way. I might be more cautious as a red pill man. That's fine. But I'm still behaving the same way because the compulsion is still there. And to clear yourself, I think, of that compulsion, you do need to undergo a certain level of purge. And so the way I see this closure of bridging this notion of you don't need to be a monk in that sort of sense. You don't need to abstain from sex forever. But I think it would be very beneficial to anybody looking towards adopting MGTOW ideas, adopt them in your actions. And one of the things I would suggest is two trials, really. One, abstain from sex for 2 years. That'll clean you up very quickly. Now, abstain in terms of a conscious way, not in terms of I just can't get laid, because the desire is still there. It's just unfulfilled. And the second way, live alone. Live absolutely alone. No roommates, no student housing, no anything like that if you can afford it, for about 2 years. And try and keep to yourself for a while until you end up finding yourself. And I find that if you undergo those two trials, then everything you do past that will be much, much more conducive to an actual choice as opposed to a compulsion. And I
yeah.
think, yeah.
I can see exactly where you're coming from now, because I was waiting for this to develop in terms of there being a rite of passage that's dictated to by the the collective of MGTOW, for want of better words. You know, if it's there, set in stone and you have to do this. I mean, people will always resist. Nobody likes to be forced to do anything, and people's first reaction will be to resist. And then there's always the argument is of, you know, you can't say whether I'm Mgtow or not. And it's almost like the rite of passage would almost be like an initiation to get into a biker gang. You know, you have to do this, otherwise you can't wear the patch. And that then becomes, you know, you can join the gang, but you can't. But I understand where you're coming from now. It's like a self-administered initiation, where if they don't do it, fine, they can live a lie, or they can live without the benefits of Mgtow. Because I mean, you know, you said life is great. When I first said, how are you, Marcus? You said, oh, life is great. And I just felt exactly the same. I knew exactly where you were coming from, because finally I feel the same. You know, I think, wow, this is working. This is actually working, you know, and I can see the benefits. It is good for a man. It's good for your mind. It's good for you emotionally. It's good for you financially, physically, um, you know, in every respect. All the spare time, you can do what you want. But the problems I see with people who don't replace these patterns of behavior is a lot of it takes them to places where their rationality and their inhibitions are depleted. So they may have consumed alcohol, or they may take drugs. That's obviously up to the individual. But with those substances inside of them, because they're in a club or they're in a bar, then the inhibitions are lowered, their sense of responsibility, and maybe they're more reckless because of the endorphins, you know, released by the alcohol or the drugs. They become more reckless, and then they're less able to make these rational decisions about indulging in you know, what we know to be dangerous liaisons, dangerous relationships. So there's almost a period of temporary insanity where uh, the heightened sense of pleasure from alcohol and drugs will lead them into danger. And once they're there, the sight of a naked woman, or the smell of a woman's perfume, or whatever game she plays, flicking her hair and all that sort of stuff, they're drawn in. And that's the point of no return. So it's almost like keeping men out of harm's way. You know, say, if you're never in that place, that thing can never happen to you. But again, some people resist because they say, you can't tell me where to go, you can't tell me what to do. And I think you're right. I cannot tell you where to go, what to do, how to live your life. And in the same respect, why would you listen to me anyway? You know, I can't tell anyone what to do. If someone does something, they do it of their own free will. And if they say, well, I did it because that man on YouTube said so, then they'd just be using me as a get out clause for the fact that they wanted to do it in the first place. So it has to be a self-administered initiation because they want to change. They have to say, to do this, I'm going to have to go cold turkey, like you say, 2 years, live on your own, abstain from sex. And then if you want to, slowly introduce it or find safer ways to go about it. But yeah, for me, abstinence really is just my way of practicing self-preservation and just being 100% sure that the past doesn't repeat itself. So
Yeah, but that's exactly what I mean. Once you're kind of purged of all this stuff, then it really doesn't matter what you do, right?
no.
Then you're really making clear-minded decisions, and you know, whatever path you take. I mean, that's what I see when we look at guys. You know, well, there's two kind of phenomenons. You see guys that come into MGTOW and they last for a few months, maybe up to a year, and they fall off. Now, I don't know. There's two possible outs for them. One, there's nothing left for them to do. They've undergone a transition, and you know, they're just don't want to participate in the conversation anymore because it doesn't really matter. They've left the camp. They got what they got. Go team. another group of guys that fall off the wagon because they haven't undergone any sort of trials for themselves to actually put this stuff into practice, and that identity never sunk in, so they fall back into the plantation because that identity is much stronger in them. Now, now, what would be ideal is, again, if they did actually implement some of this stuff, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. And when you come to certain criticisms of Mgtow in terms of why do the Mgtow videos always seem to repeat the same subjects and all that, well, I see a lot of that being like the kind of the elders, the camp counselor sort of thing, is that we repeat it because there's always new people involved, and it's a transitionary phase. And those that last for a long time listening to it, I think they expect more from Mgtow than so far what has been proposed. So most of the discourse in Mgtow, as I see it, it's always been around sexual dynamics, the male-female relationship. I think some of these guys may have absorbed this message, implemented it to some degree, but now also wanted to apply to further aspects of life, perhaps to finding meaning in life or something like that. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. When you get videos from, sorry, not videos, when you get messages from people that ask, what does it mean to be a man? How does that all work? It's a hard question to answer because it involves so many different facets. And Mgtow, from what I've encountered so much from the videos, has always been mostly sexual dynamics. But I can see a demand for identity going forward beyond just the sexual nature of it. And I look at introducing things like Stoicism into the conversation, introducing Aristotelianism, Platonism, existentialism, any of these things that do offer these more complete packages of things outside of male-female dynamics. And I don't know, maybe some people are looking for a complete package, as if Mgtow as an identity has a lot of different, that encompasses more aspects of life than just male-female dynamics, which is what I think is the core of Mgtow. So for those guys, maybe it's not enough. Maybe the videos are boring now because they only talk about the same things. But to extend it outwards is almost is to create a complete way of life, and that doesn't need to be done in the context of what we do that is unique to Mgtow. That needs to be extended now to philosophy proper, which has been done and has been done for thousands of years. So yeah, so there we go. We have these various characters and how they play themselves out, and how I think they view this transition and what they expect out of it. Now, let me ask you a question, a very simple question.
Mm-hmm.
What constitutes a Mgtow video?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, there could be many different types of Mgtow video. Really, everybody starts off with that how I became a Mgtow, and they tell their life story, and they're basically setting the scene. For me, maybe most channels could be the story of a man's transformation from beginning to end. So every Mgtow video is another step along the way of that man's development or that man's rebirth. So it's almost like you say the threshold in the rite of passage. You're viewing that man out in the wilderness where he's reinventing himself. So a Mgtow video is different stages of that man's reprogramming. That's the best way I can explain it.
Well, I mean, I thought about this a little bit, and I do have an answer I've come to, but I'll just continue asking questions just to see what you have to say about it. What about videos like ones delving into human nature in terms of, say, evolution or evolutionary psychology? I mean, how do those fit? Those aren't testimonials of a man's transition. Those are just descriptive. How are those Mgtow videos?
Oh, that's another difficult one. Evolutionary psychology really They're looking at the species or tribalism and trying to relate it back to that. And a lot of it seems to be too vague. It's too sort of obtuse. It's not applicable for me. I can see we have to look at every single thing we can. We have to look at science. We have to look at psychology, philosophy, medicine. We have to try and get answers from everywhere. But some of it I see is clutching at straws. So
But
even the
no,
stuff.
sorry to interrupt you because I don't want you to comment on the value or merit of these things, but try
Mm,
to get at the essence of why a video talking about evolutionary psychology would, in essence, still be accepted as a MGTOW video. And the contrast I'll give you is that if I were to make a video on, say, botany, that wouldn't fly as a MGTOW video. It would be a video made by somebody who's MGTOW, but itself would not be a MGTOW video, right?
it doesn't offer any attempt at answering any of the questions we've got in MGTOW.
That's
So
right.
MGTOW video is not all of them offer solutions, but they're an attempt at giving answers to questions. And maybe I always look at MGTOW videos as another piece of the puzzle. And sometimes people will have a eureka moment, and it will sort of touch a nerve with them, and they'll be able to relate to it, and then it will help them get one more step further into MGTOW or further into finding out who they are.
Exactly. And that is the key term, finding out who they are. I
Yeah,
I agree with you completely. I think that the essence of a MGTOW video, when you look at the cross section of all MGTOW videos, is the search for identity. It's
yeah,
always been the search for identity. Any video, whether it's about other cultures, about how animals behave, evolutionary psychology, evolution philosophy, people's personal experiences, feminism or gendered related laws or stuff from the MRM and things like that. It's all about identity. It's always been about identity. And anything that deviates and has no contributing factor to forming identity, it doesn't seem to be a MGTOW video, even though it does fit the mold as saying being a science video. I mean, videos about evolution are theoretically science videos, but botany is a science video yet has no MGTOW value. Chemistry could be a science video but has no MGTOW value because it lacks that connection to identity.
mhm.
That's
Yeah. You can, in some respects, you can take a subject or a word and then relate it back to MGTOW without going to extremes. But I find for the fact that everything it has been sort of tainted by gynocentrism. So if you read things, you can extract the gynocentric elements and then rewrite it, almost like the hierarchy of needs, where you look at the model and you say, okay, in this traditionalist um, society that used to be or never was, it makes sense. People have physiological needs, like they need to eat and they need to sleep and certain things they need to do just to stay alive. And then they ascend up the pyramid. But if we take a model like that and we want to turn it into a MGTOW model, we have to eliminate the tier. I think it's the third tier where they class sexual intimacy as a need, and it is a need. Um, but if we went with the original model, there would be problems there. If that is the third tier and a man can't ascend above that, he's stuck on that sexual intimacy. And the way things are structured nowadays is the woman just holds that back as value anyway, and then the man has to waste time and resources and energy trying to get this juice that isn't worth the squeeze. And if he doesn't um, take this tier out of the hierarchy of needs, he will never get to the self actualization. you know, and the things you talk about, you know, studying philosophy, art, you know, men actually becoming who they need to be, because, you know, Maslow says that's a need as well. You know, what a man can be, he must be. And a lot of men get stuck on this sexual intimacy tier, and they and it's just not set up to satisfy a man these days, and it can be his downfall. So if by pursuing this need for sexual intimacy, the man comes a cropper, then he can lose everything he's accumulated up to that point. He could lose his house, he could lose his means of earning a living. So then he's without shelter, he's without sustenance, his means to buy food. So there's that, you know, that model doesn't work. So we can take these things from science to a point, and we can make these into MGTOW videos, but we have to sort of adapt it and just extract the gynocentric elements.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when you come looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs in whatever format it may take, it's still tackling that know thyself question, that what am I question. Now,
Yeah.
when you look at sexual needs, quote unquote, I just look at them as appetites. They're just appetites. They're not needs. I mean, people can have appetites for all sorts of crazy things.
Mm.
Um, I suppose in the context of that pyramid, it's one of those distractions, right? It's something you crave that seemingly prevents many people from ascending upward if they don't satisfy that craving. But to place it as a need of any sort or a mandatory satisfaction, I don't think is the case. It doesn't
Uh,
really make any
I,
sense.
I can see it to sort of perpetuate the species and keep mankind alive. In that respect, it's a need, but it's not a need. It's not a vital need. I would say it's a modal need. You know, it's a pleasurable experience, but it's not vital for your own existence. You're not going to die without sex. I can see um, being excluded from society or being alone for too long is detrimental, because we all need that social interaction. We are social creatures to a point. There are some exceptions, but yeah, I can see why people say it's a need, in the respect that it can be damaging not to have it. But in my own experience and many other people's experience, the cost of pursuing that need, if they want to call it a need, far outweighs any benefits you get from it. So then it becomes actually a detrimental need that becomes something that certainly isn't needed in your life, and something you could really do without. So yeah, for me, and it goes back to this abstinence and this period of seclusion, where you say, let me see if I can live without these things. And then you learn to control whether you need it or not. And if you don't need it, then, you know, it's no longer necessary. It doesn't have to be a part of your life anymore.
Yep, that's basically how I see that particular thing. Um, it's obviously so. This goes back to something you said earlier. As you get older, you get a, a more intimate connection with your awareness of your own impending death. Um,
Mm.
with every, I suppose, generation that one experiences, and I'm not talking about like in terms of history, but in terms of your own life. So your first 10 years, your 20s, your teenage years, and your 20s, your 30s. There's certain transitions that do happen, and it's obviously the case that sex drive goes down. So there's a natural kind of a MGTOWification, I suppose, that to some extent happens just naturally. Um,
Mm.
but your 20s and your 30s, you do need to exert some sort of effort to keep yourself, I suppose, outside the sniper sights for many of the laws that permeate modern culture. And from what I see, if you can kind of survive those 2 decades and come out okay, then it's probably going to be a lot easier to keep up the MGTOW life after the fact. So I'm kind of curious, in terms of the ability for somebody to go through these rites, and successfully go through it, how closely aligned do you find it to be to the age bracket of the individual?
Let me answer a question with a question. Do you think being immersed in all this MGTOW information can accelerate the depletion of a man's sex drive? So in terms of it's irrelevant what age they are and how much they are sexually driven. Once they're exposed and immersed in this information, it can then it can reduce their need, or they can see women as less attractive. So do you think in terms of time scale, or what would be that man's predetermined age for his sex drive to diminish, do you think MGTOW can bring that on? Do you think it can accelerate it?
No, the quick answer is no. The longer answer is that it creates a counterforce. It builds a certain level of outrage at what you're paying to get this, and that counterforce, it could create that counterforce enough so that you no longer engage the same level. And I think again, it's always challenging. Like I can't even imagine how I would react to MGTOW if I encountered it for the first time in my like late teens, early 20s, or mid 20s. I don't know. It'd be very difficult for me.
I can't, and I can see there'll be a lot of young people if they listen to this saying, "Oh, you're not taking into account the 21-year-olds," and I'm not sure how I would react if I was told all this information when I was 21, because I was I don't know what I was. I don't really know why I did half the things I did. I was just a young man, and I was reckless and all the other things. All I could compare it to is once you learn about MGTOW and the cost of it, the actual price of associating with women, you could compare it to a young man, say, buying his Big Mac at McDonald's, and 1 week his Big Mac meal is a $5. Then he finds MGTOW and learns that the cost of his Big Mac meal is now $1,000. He's going to go, oh, fuck's sake, I still want that, but I didn't realize it was going to cost so much. And then he's got that. He's put in that situation where he goes, fuck, do I really want it? I really want that. But is it worth the price? And then you start with the struggle, and if they still go back knowing what it's cost, well, then that's the choice they've made. As a young man, I don't know what I would have done as a young man. So I can understand these young men, and they're absolutely tortured. They come to me and they say, I can understand everything you're saying, it makes sense, but I'm 21. And they don't have to ask any more questions after that, because I just remember what I was like. And I think, well, I'd be a hypocrite to say to you, become celibate, because I'm not sure I could have done it when I was 21. I don't think I could.
No, exactly, and that's something we need to keep in the mix and understand. I mean, you're older than I am, and I'm a certain age. I mean, I'm 33, so I speak from that kind of perspective. I suppose I found MGTOW maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Would have brought me to the end of my 20s. So a lot of my craziness was already purged, just naturally. But I suppose for men of that age, it's really just a set of loose guidelines. Yeah, do your craziness because you're going to do it probably undoubtedly anyways. But don't get anybody pregnant. Don't get married. And just weather the storm. Weather it as best as you can, whatever that means. And it'll get easier once you get older.
Yeah, I wonder if there's I wonder if there is almost like a battery that runs out, and that's the man's time span for being reckless and young. And when it's all used up, You know, maybe it's down to the amount of bad experience he has, and that can sort of bring it on, and he'll say, oh, this is just too painful now, I'm gonna have to stop behaving like this. Or maybe he just sort of burns out and says, okay, now time to grow up. I don't know whether it's the sort of need to reproduce. um, I always said about the need to reproduce, it doesn't add up. It's disproportionate to the amount of times a man wants to have sex. You know, if a man could, he'd fuck a woman 3 times a day. And we've all had first time girlfriends, you know, and spent the whole day with her and just shagged her senseless. But you can't call that the need to reproduce. You can't justify being that sexually active as the need to reproduce, because you don't need to produce that many babies. So if it was just the need to reproduce, you would say once or twice a year. Then you could justify it with that. But yeah, it's just disproportionate. A man's sex drive is just disproportionate to that need to perpetuate the human race. So I don't really understand it. I don't really understand why a man's sex drive is that high, especially in young men, um, and why it's so uncontrollable. It just seems to be sort of all out of whack, you know.
Yeah, I haven't given much thought to being young again, or younger at least.
Yeah.
In that sense, I, yeah, I know how I behaved, and it
But
wasn't
it is
great.
like addiction, isn't it? It's like doing things to excess. You don't have to. It's like an alcoholic will drink, and then he'll get up in the morning and have a drink, and you think, surely you got enough pleasure from drinking last night. Why are you still doing it? And when people start doing things to excess, then it becomes detrimental. It eats into their time that they should be working. Or, you know, when I was younger, I had girlfriends, and I would be late for work because, you know, they wanted some in the morning, and I think this is fucking stupid. I could lose my job for this. And I know what it's like to be young. Um, I just don't know why we do it when we're younger. I don't know why we're that enamored by women. Simply
Again,
speaking.
I would imagine part of it is driven by identity and approval, is that there's a level of status that is achieved by having a girlfriend or getting laid and all that. There's an aspect of that is, yeah, again, back to this rite of passage business, is that there's no transition. And the
Mm.
peer group will always support the notion that if you're fucking more women or more often, you're more of a man. So I can
Yeah,
imagine that having a contributing force to it.
yeah, it becomes part of their self-esteem and then forms part of their identity and how they're perceived by everybody else in their social group. Um, and it makes them feel good. You know, look at my girlfriend. She's a 6 foot blonde with great big tits, and they say, "Wow, you're the man," and it boosts their self-esteem. And you know, they invest some of their identity in this woman that's on their arm. She's not going to stick around. That's why they're so destroyed when when she dumps him for someone who's got a Porsche. You know, he's invested so much of himself in that person that he's lost his own identity, and he doesn't know who he is. So he's sort of lost. He's lost when she's gone, and he has to find himself again. And I've had this in the past where I think I haven't got a fucking clue who I am now. I don't know what happened the last 4 or 5 years, where you're just constantly pressured to be someone who you're not. And then when that person goes, they take your identity with them. And it was never your identity anyway. It's one they fabricated for you to appease them, you know, so they could try and mold you into this thing that you're not. And then you just find yourself completely devoid of your own identity. And like you say, it's because you've been constantly surrounded and influenced by people, and you haven't sort of taken time to go and sit on your own, speak to yourself. You know, even the self talk every single day is you asking yourself questions in your own head. You've got to live with that mind, and that mind constantly speaks to you. And if you just take some time out without people interrupting in that conversation that you're having with yourself, you might actually get some answers. But if you never answer your own questions, you know, you're never going to make sense of anything.
Again, it's easy to speculate, hard to create an argument around this, especially that we've just kind of stumbled into the subject without, well, at least for myself, having given it any thought. So I'm not going to comment anymore because I'm just going to probably say
Yeah.
something
But
stupid.
that's when you start to wonder if you're mad or not. When you start looking and you say, "Wow, I didn't know I thought these things," and then you have to answer all these questions that are coming, and you have to rationalize everything. And then you think, "Is this normal? Does everybody else think like this?" And you'll never know unless you ask them.
So maybe what we should do is, instead of speculating in our own way, reflecting back and projecting our current being into what we think we were when we were, whatever, 10, 20 years younger. Maybe there's Mgtow who are that age who have something to feed back that they can express themselves in a more concrete way of their immediate experience, could say what it is that they're going through to shed some light on that sort of experience. Um, Again, I work off long, long gone memories, which are
Yeah,
probably not even true at this point. It's just what
yeah,
I choose to remember.
they're distorted.
Very much so, rewritten so many times that they don't even reflect what I may have been at the time. So,
Yeah,
but as for the conversation that we've had so far, just to trail back to the original point, so we started off with your quote. Going on this MGTOW consciousness. Let's go back to that and just maybe, we've been going for about an hour 40, so let's just get some closing statements and maybe finish off this video. So, in terms of this MGTOW consciousness, how do you find it based on what we talked about so far?
in terms of the individual or in terms of the collective.
Well, in terms of the collective. So, if we go back to your quote here, well, your comment here, let me see. Um, yeah, I did see that many men are carrying guilt on their conscience as a result of shame and feelings of failure. So, talking about that, just sticking with that one quote, how do you find that based on this new discussion that we've talked about, this rite of passage and the other
I
topics
see
we've
that
covered?
as man, men are shedding their willingness to be manipulated. They've realized that their programming was based on them being made to feel bad. If you don't live up to the expectations of you as a man, we're going to make you feel bad. We're going to accuse you, we're going to emasculate you, we're going to make you feel guilty, and you're going to carry that around with you. And now men are saying, you know, you didn't have the right to do that to me, to make me feel like that. I'm not disposable. And men are starting to realize their worth again, and they're shedding that willingness to be manipulated. And they're realizing that they have been manipulated with guilt and shame and being made to feel like a failure. And men have said it. They said, "Oh, I failed everyone," and they're blaming themselves. And I think men now in MGTOW have stopped blaming themselves, and they've stopped letting people blame them as well and make them feel bad, because most of the things that happen to men were out of their control. So yeah, that's how I see.
Do you think that MGTOW is, as this consciousness that you're seeing unfold, do you think it's growing somewhat healthily? We started the conversation where, there's this risk of becoming a cult. Uh, do you think that that's what's going to happen, that it eventually become this grossly orthodox, dogmatic sort of creation that's only going to produce men who faction off by defining themselves as MGTOW based on an ever-growing stricter set of rules? Or do you think it's going to keep kind of pure?
Yeah, I think that resides in the individual. If they're inclined to be that way, then they will be that way. If they're a follower, they will always be a follower. If they're an individual and they answer to nobody and they question everything and do their own research, then they will always be that way. So if someone tells them something, they're not going to accept that as gospel. They're going to go away and they're going to come back and question it, and that's how we sort of further the debate. But there are people who follow blindly. They accept advice and don't question it. In fact, some people ask to be spoon-fed, and they ask you. I've noticed this before, and it's an immediate attempt to apportioning any responsibility for the outcome of their choices on the person who gave them the advice. But they chose to take it without questioning. In fact, they asked for advice, and we do see this. People say, "What do you think I should do?" And then I will say to them, "What do you think you should do? It's your life, I don't know you." But there is this. There are those people who are just like that, and they'll always be like that. So Mgtow can't make them follow. It can't make them not follow. It can't make them go away and look inward and practice introspection. It can't make anyone do anything. They just have to make themselves, do it or not do it. It's, it's just information given over the internet. As I see it, that's how I see it.
So here's the last question I'm going to ask, and I think it's very interesting. That'll probably open up a set of debates on its own. Is that no matter how we look at the situation, the more subs you have, the more influence you wield. It's just how it is, because you reach more people. Do you believe that there's a certain set of core accountability that any content producer has because they can influence whatever group of people that they have listening to them? Do you think there's a certain things of rules that they need to abide by?
There is, because people could obviously manipulate and abuse that power, if you can call it a power, if they become aware of the fact that people are taking on what they say. If a person was a manipulator, then they're in a perfect position to do that. They could influence people's thinking and behavior quite easily. And it goes back to the thing where, say, if I made a video and other people were struggling for ideas, they would then make a video. So I could say, well, I'm going to make a video on this. And here's a little social experiment to see how many other people make that video. And to a point, I've made them make that video. And you can do that. You can influence people's thinking. Even the other content makers. So you can't even gauge how much of the thoughts you've influenced. And that actually sounds quite devious and underhanded. The way the thoughts become the words, become the actions. And if you did it over a sustained period of time, you could shape people's thinking, and it would manifest itself in words and the way they spoke to people. And then it would, in time become their actions. So there is definitely a responsibility. But then also the flip side of that is, just because you say something, it doesn't mean people have to accept it as gospel or go away and take your information and then say, well, I did that because he said that. So you've got that sort of caveat, that sort of get out clause where you can say, well, he didn't have to do it just because he watched my YouTube video. And in terms of subscribers and the numbers of subscribers, I washed my hands of that subscriber count thing a long time ago when you see channels with lots of subscribers and hardly any views. And you just think, oh, this could be so easily manipulated. This could be such a con that really, well, for me personally speaking, subscriber count means nothing, because it's just the amount of people that clicked on the subscribe button. It doesn't mean the content is good. It doesn't mean that they've got anything of worth to say. So for some it does, though. For some they will take the word of someone with a higher subscriber count and they will say, well, he said that, so you need to shut the fuck up because he's got 20,000 and you've only got 5,000.
I'm not really talking about the subscriber wars in that context. Like, who clearly it's fallacious to assume more subs equals better content or more correct opinion or anything like that. But all I was gaining at is that somebody with more subs wields more influence because they can reach more people. That's why mainstream media has so much power to convey certain messages. Not because what they say is worth listening to, but because they reach so many people, they do influence people. So because of this ability to influence, what is in your opinion, the accountability that should be that you find, at least for example, for yourself? How do you find yourself to some extent accountable of what you say because of the influence you wield?
I don't see myself as wielding influence really. And as for being accountable for the things I say, um, it's really a case of how you're perceived. So, I mean, I could make a video and say anything I wanted, and a lot of MGTOW will call you out, but a lot won't. And a lot of people will thumb the video up just because you made it. And in that respect, you think, how much power do I wield? I'll say anything, you know. So then it just sort of becomes a joke. So I'm very aware of that, and I think, well, I don't want to go down that road, and so I have to be even more aware of doing research and making sure you give out as many facts as you possibly can based on the research you've had access to. So then you're not taking advantage of people who don't have the time. You know, you're not taking advantage of the fact that people may just be influenced by you because it's you, and it's just a small YouTube channel. I mean, it really is. I know there's a lot of people listening, but a lot of people will call bullshit out. And in fact, people go looking to call bullshit out, and I think the more subs you get, the more people look to shoot you down. Actually, they wait for you to trip up, and then they say, "Ah, I knew he was full of shit." And that's when you really sort of see, you know, whether people will listen or not. And I mean, I welcome that. If I make a video and someone says, "Oh, that's bollocks," or I disagree with that point, and then they tell me why, then I think, "Oh, thank God someone's joining in the conversation." Sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself, and if people just agree, it becomes like, you know, it's just a one-sided conversation. You need some input from the people in the comments. So for me personally, I think my subscribers are good. I'm happy, and it could be down to who your subscribers are. You know, maybe the channels with the big numbers get the most amount of blind followers because they target those channels and say, I'm gonna show allegiance to them because in my eyes they're prominent. You know, I think every channel's different, but my subscribers, the majority of them aren't like that. That you know, if I talk shit, they'll call me out on it. And they do. I mean, God, I've had more thumbs down lately than ever. Some for different reasons, but when you get, and TFM said it as well, when you get thumbs down, you can look at the video and say, you know, I see why they've thumbed that down now, and you can sort of gauge um, things that make sense, or maybe you've gone off track, or you've sort of, you know, you've lost it a bit. So yeah, I don't know if you can pinpoint, you know, how much power or influence you've got over people. It's difficult.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That was just a general question. I was just kind of curious about your opinion on it.
Yeah. And that was me thinking out loud, you know.
Mhm.
That was me just because I've never thought about it.
Yeah, I've spent some time thinking about this concept. I haven't come to yet a concrete conclusion on. I'm still stuck on the idea that what Plato was saying is that all art is didactic, meaning that everything we produce, because, well, I mean, you get a lot of views, is that uh, there's some element of teaching involved whereby which people are influenced. So what responsibility does that wield? I mean, sure, you're not accountable to any one individual, obviously, but when you look at the masses, when you look at a video say has 30,000 views and the video is say an hour long, you've consumed 30,000 hours of energy in the world.
Yeah.
So that clearly did something,
But
in
do
mass.
you think, do you think then, in terms of getting information across, that sometimes you should disengage with the people who may be listening and just concentrate on communicating your message as best you can and getting as much accurate information as you can. And then you could say, even though you're aware of the fact that you might influence a lot of people or a lot of people may be listening, um, it has no bearing on the video. The video is just you imparting information and people listening. There's no connection between you and them.
Well, again, back to Plato, he was saying, in the Republic especially, he was saying that the only sort of art that he would allow into his good city is hymns to the gods and praises of good men. And the reason he was doing that is to always reinforce positive things that he would determine through philosophical inquiry. So the funny things would always be things that should be laughed at, like stupidity and vice and things like that. There should never be a form of art that would praise vice. Like one video I'll give you, not video, but one TV series that I find kind of a problem is the show Dexter, because it glamorizes a serial killer. In a way, it makes this character into this sort of likable, justifiable creature. I don't know. It doesn't sit very well with me, and it seems to be an ever growing trend with the notion of glamorizing this darkness, um, or at least projecting it more in a positive way, which should never really be done. Whatever the reasons are, there's a core set of values that are good depending on your ethical system that should be perpetually reinforced. And all media that deviates from that creates people that would adhere to the deviant message. And again, I don't want to get into this too much because I haven't actually sat through and constructed a very meaningful argument towards it. But the question in general I was getting at is that every content producer has some level of influence because people watch your stuff. That's just how it works. And I think that because of that, they should be aware of what influence they're spreading. I mean, if you get a lot of subs and you spread a hate message, some people are going to listen to you, and that's just how it's going to be. So it's probably not a good idea to spread things like that.
Do you think, say, there was what could be perceived to be a hate message or a dark message, but the intent behind the message was good? It's almost like the shock factor, as if to say, um, this is to make you aware of potentially bad things that could happen. And it is uneasy, it's not good to watch or hear, but because it's a reality, then you have to take on board. And again, it's like the guilt and remorse. Guilt and remorse doesn't feel good, and it feels bad for a reason, because you don't want to feel like that. So unless you redress the way you feel, unless you do something about the guilt and remorse by not repeating those behaviors that made you feel that way in the first place, you're going to feel bad. So to feel bad, or to be, and I don't like this phrase, or to be made to feel. I don't think people can make you feel necessarily. They can instill feelings within you or activate feelings within you, but those feelings are there for a reason. So they're your own. Nobody passed them on to you. So there's that, where some people don't like the way you've made them feel, or the fact that you've given a message that's slightly dark, and it makes them feel like you can't be happy all the time, and not that, and the world isn't all sunshine, and it's not like that, and that's the reality check, and sometimes reality is very uncomfortable for people, and then of course you got that transference where you got that sort of unconscious redirection of feelings, and people pick up on you. So it could be the inflection in your voice tones. It could be the images you're showing. It could be the background music, or the way you wanted the video to come across. So there's also that. But if the intention behind the message is good, to keep people out of harm's way, then you've just gone a different way of, you haven't made them feel good so they can be good. You've made them feel bad so they can be good. It's
If
that's my approach, and a lot of people take offense to me personally, the way I do it.
offending people is not really a problem that I see. I mean, again, as long as my standard is straightforward, I try to avoid sophistry, right? So even if I may be wrong in any philosophical account that I put forward, at least I'm not engaging in sophistry, and sophistry being more of akin to knowingly deceiving people to achieve the ends of an agenda, to implant a certain conclusion in people's minds by logical tricks that make it sound justified. That's my general standard of going by things. Now, my accounts may be wrong, but they're not wrong because I engaged in sophistry. So I don't have an agenda in that aspect that I'm aware of. I think pushing an agenda in general is probably not good if it cannot be justified philosophically. And outside of that, not really. I mean, expressing opinions is fine. It's probably recommended that over time you develop those ideas as well. So if you have certain concepts, you develop them over a period of time as you refine your own thinking, which is great. I mean, you can start off completely wrong, but over a period of time you refine what you said in the past and work from that direction. But when you look at people when you look at certain channels, not inside MGTOW per se, but just you can tell almost that every video that they're going to make, like especially conspiracy theory videos, that every video that they're going to make is going to lean into some sort of agenda that they're peddling, that they'll make the facts, they'll make the story fit, well, the facts fit the story, basically. That sort of cherry picking aspect of it. So I don't really agree with that direction. I mean, sometimes you're going to come to conclusions that simply they don't work with things you said in the past, or they don't work with other ideas that potentially you hold. So you refine, and yeah, just work from there, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose that would be sort of classed as almost like deception and manipulation, which is, like I say, that sort of thing would get called out. But yeah, if we stick to the truth, even if it's an ugly truth, then people can question it. And then we go into the subjective and the objective. And this is my problem. And it really is a whole new video, a whole new conversation. And you'll be able to clarify many of these points, but it's very difficult to give versions of truth from your own experience, knowing that happened and that is a fact, and then to be challenged, because subjectively people can't accept it, because it's not been in their experience. So they're saying, well, that may be true for you, but it's not true for me. And in that respect, then you get into the question of, well, what's true for you now, or what's not true for you now could be true for you in the future. and then that will be your subjective reality. So the things I'm saying are true and possibly will be true for you. So you can't negate the things I say, or you can't dismiss the things I say, because I'm just telling you from one man's point of view. So where we get into that sort of trying to manipulate people's thinking, sometimes people feel like you're trying to manipulate their way of thinking, because they say, well, that's not the truth as I've experienced it. You know, and it becomes like that. I mean, you'd see it from an epistemology point of view, and then we get into what is true. You know, what is true and what isn't true. Um, and is someone trying to manipulate the way others think? You know, are they trying to deceive people or not? Or are they just, you know, drawing from personal experience and saying, there you go, there's the message, take it or leave it?
Yeah, this is definitely
Yeah,
this is definitely its own subject.
yeah,
So it's probably best we don't deviate and just close off this video and possibly resume this conversation in another one at some point in the future once we have the time to even raise the questions like, is there a responsibility of a Mgtow content producer? What is their relationship with their audience? Maybe that's the appropriate question.
yeah, yeah. And then look at what people perceive to be acceptable content, and what they perceive to be, you know, overstepping boundaries, if there are any boundaries, because, you know, at the end of the day, we were never down to be politically correct. And I think that was one of the strengths. And when people try and pull us all into line, and make us conform, it almost, sometimes it felt like we were being made to conform. And then you get the pushback, and then it becomes, you know, it goes further in the other direction, because you'll always resist that pressure, you know, if someone's forcing you to do something. So yeah.
Well, I'd really like to hear, and I think just close this video on this. I'd really like to hear from commenters what they have to say about what they feel the relationship of the content producer to the listener is, and if they feel there's a certain obligation that any content producer has to them. Those are the two sort of questions. Oh, and a third one perhaps is that, what do you think is the essence of a Mgtow video?
Yeah, good
Cool.
questions.
And thanks for the conversation. And I guess we'll talk again at some point soon.
Yeah, that was long overdue.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
All right, cheers, Marcus.
Bye.